Okay, has everyone clicked on it?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, guys, welcome back to the Pro Prep podcast. And today is a slightly different day. I've got two really amazing women on here that are going to help discuss the topic, which is natural bodybuilding and why it might be important to also have a natural coach that can help guide you along that way. And I'm joined by two natural figure competitors in various places in the world. So I'll let you two introduce yourselves. Jen, do you want to start and kick off?
Okay, sure. My name is Jennifer Mercieca. I am a natural figure competitor. I live in Canada, in Toronto. So I've been competing since 2014. And I want to thank you very much, Steff, for inviting me to talk about my experiences in the sport.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. It's so great to have you. And Jen, where are you in the world for our listeners right now?
I live in Toronto, Canada. So Toronto, Ontario, north, I guess, for some people.
Yeah, and
west for others.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. So it's nice and early for Jen this morning, and it's like 2 o'clock for us.
Yes.
And Zoe, we have Zoe on the pod.
Hey guys. I'm Zoe. I've been competing as a natural figure competitor since 2017. Steff is one of my coaches, along with Andrew. Started with them 2019 in my off season, and I've recently competed this year in actually non-tested federation, which I'm sure we will grab a chat on. So thanks for bringing me on.
Awesome. Well, 2 really different, unique experiences, I think, as well. And Jen, when did you start competing? When was it you started as well?
I began in 2014. So actually my first prep began in 2014, and I did in fact compete that year. And I started, I'm currently, I am coached by 3D Muscle Journey, Alberto Nunez. Shout out to Alberto. But I didn't start out that way. I started out very actually naive to the entire industry, to be quite honest. I'd been training for decades, probably at that point. And I'd always had this, feeling that I really wanted to compete. And when I finally had the courage to do so, I was very naive to the fact that there was such a big difference between organizations and that there were drug tested and non-drug tested. So given that here in Canada, and particularly in the area that I live in, it's primarily dominated by an organization that is part of the IFBB Pro League. And as such, the majority of the competitions, the coaches, they're all kind of coming from that background. So I did a lot of learning and made a lot of mistakes in the first few years. But fortunately for me, in the last 5 years, I've been with 3D Muscle Journey, and I'm sure we'll get into the big differences there. But I'm also fortunate to have Steff as one of my coaches, my posing coach. And so expecting to bring, the best of me in this year. Fingers crossed.
Lots of class.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic maybe to start with, which is the differences between, I kind of call it the open circuit and the natural circuit. And some people go into bodybuilding knowing that from the offset, that there's these 2 sort of different avenues in the sport, and then some people don't at all. And like, I know for a fact that when I first started, I was really lucky at that time to be surrounded by a few people in my gym who were already on the natural circuit. So it was kind of like, start with the natural shows, you'll be great. And I had no other concept of where else to go at the start. But I think the opposite of that is exactly what you, Jen, said, which is most people come in and they have no idea until suddenly they're like, how do I look like that?
Exactly. and living up to the expectations that I grew up in an era, and I'm dating myself, but where it was magazines, right? So, you know, that most of the women in the magazines were IFBB pros. My all-time favorite figure competitor was Monica Brandt. And I don't know, you know, whether or not she was enhanced, but, you know, being in that circuit, I would imagine that they were surrounded by that kind. So, you know, we would always look to these competitors thinking, wow, like, why don't I look like that after 10 years of training, right? So it's definitely an education along the way.
100%. How about you, Zoe? I mean, did you know much about the kind of the differences and what to expect when you were coming into it?
Yeah, I mean, I was 24 when I first started to go into competing and even thinking about it, but I didn't really know much about the natural world of bodybuilding. I think I only knew about one or two federations, and then obviously the more that I got into it and the more I researched, looked on Instagram, the more natural shows I saw, and like following people like yourself, a few other natural bodybuilders in the UK, I thought, well, why can't I do it? So it was a guy in my gym actually that said at the time, just I can see your potential, let's prep you. And I was sort of his first person that he would prep, which to now I've sort of learned there's more to chicken, broccoli.
Yay, thank God.
Like, you could do this with variety? What? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point as well, because like all of us, I mean, maybe I should open with the question of, what do you like about natural bodybuilding? Like, why have you, I guess, decided to put your eggs in this basket? Because let's be honest, like, as all competitors, and I think especially all three of us here have been on the circuit a little bit, you're trying to eke for those higher realms now of figure competing, you know, whether that's pro cards, British championships, world championships, you know, these sorts of things. It's at some point through that timeline, people often ask you, like, why don't you go and compete in the open shows? Or why aren't you going to go and be competitive there as well? And I think there's a pressure on you to sort of think, like, what way do I go? So I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, why has it been important to us to stay on the natural circuit and explore that?
I mean, for me, obviously this year going into FitX and also Two Bros being natural, the biggest thing for me coming out of those shows was, well, one, I did really well, and two, that I didn't look out of place next to the girls that actually were assisted. And it just goes to prove that you can still be natural and not look out of place, like your hard work does show. Reason for me being natural, keeping natural, is more so because of the side effects as well of taking things, and I feel like my voice is deep enough really, so
I know, I can second that as well. Think like looking at you, Zoe, where you went in for the open shows this year, it kind of takes guts as a natural competitor to do that, because from the other natural sort of realm looking in, people's automatic thought is, oh, they can't be natural anymore. And you sort of, I find that so infuriating, because you kind of think the second you jump onto an untested show, you kind of feel like you'll have this reputation damage almost, which is ridiculous, because, you know, you can still, and it's great, kudos to you, Zoe, because you really held yourself on an open lineup extraordinarily competitively, and it shows you the power of a natural physique over time and what it can actually achieve, which I think is phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about all of that, Jen, as well?
Well, I think that despite the fact that I was naive to the differences, staying natural was always my plan. And I remember being really surprised by the suggestions to try different things when I was competing in the circuit, even as much as backstage, where coaches would approach you and say, hey, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I can really make your body pop. Or if you really want to get muscular, come and talk to me, that sort of thing. But for me, I've always, I guess I've always kind of liked the science part of it, and the idea of, you know, doing all this work and then slowly finding out what, you know, what you've done and how well it's worked. But just also that feeling of accomplishment, that you did this and you did it naturally. Obviously the side effects and whatnot is just not something that I would even consider, but I felt that from the very beginning. And like you, Zoe, I did do many open shows. I did the circuit that I'm referring to here in Canada does have, you know, quote unquote natural shows and open shows, but they do not drug test, or at least they haven't. And I had won every placing and never had been tested, which was one of the ways that they said they would test winners. So it was really one of those things where when you competed, you really didn't know if you were on a level playing field. And it took some time for me to understand that. And when I really did, I just had this burning desire to never compete in that kind of an organization again. And I'm really looking forward to it. This year will be the first year that I compete with the WNBF, both the WNBF Canada and WNBF official. So it's very exciting for me. But I did manage to get in one natural drug tested show in my last season, which was at the very tail end, when I think I was just frustrated and I thought, okay, it's time to stop competing with in the open and start, you know, really just it feels good to also be around your peers and people who are like-minded. Where
totally.
Hard work is, you know, dedication, hard work, and just you know, being proud of what you can accomplish. I think it's phenomenal, Zoe, that you were able to stand up on that stage and be recognized when you're competing against people who, you know, had some help along the way.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to just ask you a question, Jen. Did you feel like you had to do a natural show because you did so many open shows? Did you feel pressure to sort of, not that you have to prove a point that you're a natural athlete, but to prove to everyone else, like on the gram and on social media, that you had to do a natural show just to prove you were a natural?
Well, there might have been times where I did feel that way, but quite honestly, it was just I think it was just a revelation that I had. And because especially being coached by Berto, you know, they're natural, they coach natural athletes. And so, you know, we always knew that we weren't on the same level playing field whenever I competed, but I think it was more just something that I wanted to experience, and I felt so good about it. And I do remember posting about it and getting some heat actually because like I said, it's so dominated by this one particular organization here that chances are, if you know a competitor, be it male or female, they're competing in that circuit here. And because the WNBF is just bringing shows into the East this coming year, I think that'll open the doors for, there were so many people who feel like me. And I remember meeting women who would say to me that I used to compete, but I stopped because I was tired of competing against women who were enhanced, even when the show was, you know, supposed to be natural. So it's, you know, and I am not, you know, I just want to say it, like, I have nothing against anybody who decides to go that route. It's just a personal thing for me that I feel like I feel like if you are a natural athlete or you are an enhanced athlete, just kind of stay in your lane, right? And they don't do that necessarily here, but it's getting better. So yeah, I never really felt pressured to do that. I think it was just something intrinsic where I wanted to really prove to myself as well too, right? That that you know, there was another avenue.
Yeah.
What was that, Zoe? What did you say? Sorry.
It's a good feeling, like being up on the stage against assisted athletes and not feeling out of place as well. Like it's an achievement for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like my first time the first and only time I've actually been on an open show was the NABA Universe in 2019. And for people listening, I mean, NABA's kind of like your golden goose, like the backbone of like the bodybuilding circuit here, particularly. And for me, I was like, right, I'm totally out of my depth. This is just for a bit of a fun. At the end of my season, it was the last show for me. And yeah, like I took fourth on the universe stage. And for me to take a sort of a top placing there, the girls were ginormous. I mean, they're jacked. I almost kind of compare like a good natural can stand on a stage and be competitive, but it's almost like they're a slightly pocket-sized version. Their conditioning's amazing. The muscle bellies look really full and very like tight, but we're just slightly smaller, you know. But it's still a very competitive look. And I think for all three of us to be able to stand there and go, yeah, you know, you can hold your own. It's quite a nice feeling because you can come away from that and go, actually, you can achieve something pretty special as a natural athlete. And I think a big part of wanting to even do this podcast today was to try and get more females to see and learn about natural bodybuilding. Because I see a lot of people talking to, especially on socials around our side of the country, I don't know about over there, Jen, but a couple of males and things are pushing natural bodybuilding quite prolifically on socials, which is really, really great for the sport. But I don't see a lot of women talking about natural bodybuilding, especially not high level competitors, where, you know, you've done reasonably well. Like Zoe, you know, you've done really well in the natural circuit in the UK. I've been working my way through the natural ranks here, and I love it. And you can really see kind of the health reasons as to why it's great to be a natural athlete. The dare I say it, the fairness. I feel like it's a lot fairer on a natural stage if it's a legit natural stage, that is, with proper drug testing, etc. And you don't have all of that kind of that dark side to deal with, which is a whole. I've got a lot of friends who are on the open side of the circuit, and I'm the same as you, Jen. I never judge. People can make their own decisions and make their own minds up. But there's a whole other level of psychology around that you've got to contend with, which is something I've never really wanted to go into. But I think, you know, the drug testing side you kind of mentioned there, about having a proper drug test. A lot of people don't even understand like what's involved in natural bodybuilding and why that's important. So what was your experience with that?
Well, so I at the open shows that I competed in, and I did do a few that were not natural but just open, and because like I said, here they will have natural and open. And
yeah.
At those shows, I mean, there was absolutely nothing, and at the natural shows, it wasn't any different. And I had actually competed all the way up to the national level, and yet I was always asking the question, well, when are they going to do these random drug tests? So when I actually competed in a drug tested federation, which was the ANBF, so the American Natural Bodybuilding Federation, it was very different. I mean, there was a polygraph. I was fortunate enough actually to actually win my pro card. So I went from, you know, competing for years and years in the non-tested federation, and my very first natural show, I ended up winning my pro card. And so following the win, there was the urinalysis too, which was very eye-opening. I thought to myself, wow, this is legit.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful experience. I have to be honest with you that what I experience here is very corporate, if for lack of a better word. It's a business. And I always felt like, because the shows were so enormous as well, that you were just a number, you were just a competitor. And when I did actually go to this natural organization, the experience was completely different. You know, I felt like it was all about the athletes, and that's one of the things that I feel is the biggest difference between the organizations. And I've heard this from others as well, that, you know, even I think in the US, the NPC is big. And I've talked to athletes who compete in that, which is kind of like what, I think it's the same division. It's a division of the IFBB Pro League, just like the one in Canada. And it's the same thing. Shows are big. There's lots of competitors. Not a lot of that focus is on the athlete. And the experience is totally different. And again, I think it just comes down to the people and the culture. Mm-hmm. And the kind of and what the natural side of the sport actually nurtures. Mm-hmm. And that's been my biggest experience between the two. Is it was very refreshing. Very refreshing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think with the natural circuit, I think probably we're so much smaller, aren't we, for a start? Like we're nowhere near as big. And I mean, Zoe, you've had various now, UKD, FBA, BNBF. Did you do NPA as well in Britain? I'm trying to think now.
It's one I want to do though.
It's one you want to do, yeah. So I mean, how have you found, like, good question there, like in reference obviously what Jen said there, how did you find like the difference between, say, doing FitX and Two Bros this year in comparison to doing a UKD FBA show, for example? I mean,
FitX, I kind of can rule out just because it was a brand new federation and I did their very first show. So I thought it was run really well, to be honest. I mean, a few bits here and there, but it was their first one, so let them off. And the Two Bros one that I did, I completely agree with you, Jen. So the natural shows I've done previously, I feel like they really do care about the athlete more so. I felt like in Two Bros there was a lot of it's who you know to who play sort of thing, which is quite sad to sort of hear, like, see in the sport. But I don't know, I guess it's who you know, and that kind of puts me back to I probably wouldn't compete in that open show particularly again. The FitX though, who knows, I'll compete again being natural. But yeah, definitely I definitely want to get on the natural stage again and just have that feel with all the girls backstage as well, and there's no sort of like awkward conversations like, are you natural, are you not? Mm-hmm. Or like I find some females just don't own up to it either.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I feel like there's also a lot of pressure for assisted athletes to come out if they want to, but then I feel also a lot of others go, well, if you're natural, then do a natural show as well. And I feel like it shouldn't be that way. Like if they want to be in open shows because they enjoy it more than naturals, then so be it. There's no like you need to prove a point here or there. But yeah, no, I much prefer, out of the two natural shows I've done, I probably preferred the UKD FBA more so. I just felt like judging was just a lot fairer, and just like how the day runs. I mean, with BNBF they do an evening show and it can end up being a longer day, so they do the pre-judging and then the evening shows in the evening. UKD FBA, you're on stage, come off, do your T-walk, and then awards straight away, so that's quite nice as well. But then I haven't done that since 2019, so Who and I go on the WNBF stage in 2023.
We're warming it up for you, don't worry.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think like just kind of switching gears, I guess, which is like, obviously we've all gone and done these shows, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the podcast talking about like what a natural preparation looks like, and you know, the kind of underneath the coach and how that experience pans out. Because if I was to kind of hold up two differences to sort of what a natural prep looks like in comparison to potentially an assisted females prep, these are two very different vehicles. But just for the listeners to hear an approach, it'd be nice. Obviously, Zoe, you worked alongside me, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on you know, your coaching, sort of your preparation. But Jen as well, from working with someone who else who's prolific in our industry, who's very respected as well. It'd be great to hear your approach and how you've come through your prep. Especially, I'm looking at your arms there, and they're like, I've seen them yet. I'd love to hear about that journey as well. So yeah, let's dig into a little bit about the prep side of it as well, the approach.
Yeah, I mean, my prep with you guys was very varied in diet, which I didn't know was possible, if I'm honest. Like I said previously, it's not just chicken, rice and veg. God, what I was eating Cocoa Pops at one point. I think that was good cop bad, because when Andrew saw that I was eating Cocoa Pops, they got taken out, didn't they, Steff?
I snuck in for a little while, yeah, and then we yeah,
yeah, just very varied, and being able to have off-plan meals. And I think the main thing with me keeping to natural coach is, obviously I felt like I had a better connection with, like, Steff, you knowing sort of what hormones and emotions you're going through at the time and what your body will need. So I remember training and just bursting out into tears, voice noting Steff, and you gave me a refeed meal, and I just felt 10 times better after it. Whether or not a coach that was assisted would know to do that, I'm not sure. I mean, all of those coaches were natural at some point in their life, so they do sort of have that understanding. But as years and years go on, do they forget what those sort of emotions and feelings are for a natural athlete as well, to know what to give them? But yeah, going off subjects a bit, going back to what sort of food I was on: rice cakes, different types of meats, peanut butter was in there for pretty much to the end, which I was very happy about. Yeah, I mean, just very varied, just not what the bro science of bodybuilding, like there's more, so much more to it. And the amount of food, I never really dipped below 1400 calories. I mean, I don't know what sort of calories you dip into, Jen.
Well, lucky you. Oh, well, you know, so like you, Zoe, my first experience was with a coach that probably, and you know, he was a great guy. I want to say that you know, no disrespect to him, but I just feel like, because of the type of athletes that he had been coaching, I think that he just lacked the knowledge necessary to coach a natural competitor, and that maybe they didn't understand that a natural competitor isn't as resilient as someone who is enhanced. And so, you know, the protocols were extreme at best. You know, you know, twice day cardio, fasted training, no refeeds at all. And unless it was, you know, I remember I did get what they called a carb up once, because I almost passed out during training, you know, towards the end. You know, very short durations as well. My first contest prep was, I think it was only 16 weeks long. And that may not be extremely short, but I had a lot of weight to lose. You go into your very first prep thinking, I just got to lose 10 pounds, but it ends up being 20. So, so, and the approach was always like, suck it up. You have to do what it takes. As a matter of fact, I remember they gave me this sheet before I started that basically laid that out, that you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to give up that. You're going to, and while some of that advice is important, maybe you wish you had known it. The strategies were just very old school, especially to the peaking strategies. I would be cutting water 2 days before, no sodium, loading potassium. And I think what really was the straw that broke the camel's back for me was that my coach had me on taking potassium supplements even after the competitions, and I got to a very dangerously high level. And so I just felt, I don't think that he meant to harm me. I just think that that's the whole point about not understanding and not being educated and not being evidence-based. And so at the time, I had really gotten into learning more about the evidence-based and natural competition circuit. And I had heard several podcasts with 3DMJ coaches, and I reached out to them, and it was just, I always say that my old coach was a trainer, and now I have a coach, or over the last 5 years, I really have a coach, because it was a completely different experience. It's just more of a holistic approach. So, the focus has always been on longevity and recovery and fatigue management throughout the contest prep, and just very collaborative too. One of the things I think that bothered me the most about my former coach was that when I would ask questions, because I always wanted to understand the science behind it or why I was doing something, the answer was always, just because. Well, what do you mean just because? Like, why am I doing this? And there really was, and so it's just been a world of difference coaching with Berto. Like, he really took the time to get to know me, and we make decisions together. And when he has a suggestion to do something, it's never do this. It's always, how do you feel about this? And do you think we can make this work? And what are your thoughts? And that is just something that is very comforting when you are, like you said, Zoe, when you get to those points, because we all have them, where you have that meltdown at least once during your contest prep, where you just start crying, or you're upset about absolutely nothing. And really, it's just a buildup of all of the stress, right? So having someone that you can confide in, like Steff and me with Berto, and also them being aware of you needing that stress management, right? So
I think that's a huge part of it, is the stress management and emotional management of it. Mm-hmm.
I always feel like he's a step ahead of me, right? Where I'll look back in hindsight and say he's always right. And it's just, and that is the difference to me between that cookie cutter approach that we see a lot in the industry. And, my experiences are probably not even as bad as some of the other ones that you would hear, but I was smart enough to get out of it quickly. And meaning, it was only a few years of doing that before I realized that something's not right here. I don't think that every woman goes through this who hits a stage. And so I wanted to learn more, but absolutely big difference. So hopefully other figure competitors will hear our experiences and not have to go through that themselves.
I think as well, like with a natural competitor, it's a very different vehicle. And I think I see sometimes, natural competitors that are maybe under an assisted coach, that never quite bring it, or never quite nail the conditioning, or maybe have started too long out. Because a big part of the differences I see are the length of time, first of all, it takes for a natural competitor, particularly a natural female competitor, to get into what I would classify as shredded conditioned shape. It's not a 12-week or a 10-week plan, which is what, you know, you see a lot of other competitors potentially on the assisted circuit. Well, you know, they'll put up, okay guys, I'm 12 weeks out, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that would be me at like 52 weeks out. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And the length of time that a natural's dieting phase or competitive phase are two things. And Berto's probably explained this to you as well, but we have to take a much slower degree of fat loss over a longer period of time to retain muscle tissue on the frame and ensure that we're keeping a fullness to the physique that isn't just going to just die away, you know, to the end, because we don't have anything additional apart from three variables, you know, well, a few more if you want to get technical, but we've got the training, the nutrition element of it, of course, and the cardio. They're your three kind of key tools that we've got to be able to get ready for a show as a natural. And then you can play around with, you know, other things to keep a check on, hormones, sleep, all these sorts of things. But if we were to, you know, if an assisted athlete has other components to help them retain the tissue, they can do a lot more in a lot shorter time frame.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of just a massive difference. I think a lot of people question naturals because they're like, you can't get in that shape without, you know, XYZ. And I'm like, well, have you asked that person how long they've been doing this for? Or have they come from a sporting background? Or have they come from any kind of athletic pursuit? Because a lot of the time I find that really high level naturals have come from some kind of competitive background in the first place, or if they haven't, they've had a few years of, you know, you said before, decades of training under their belt, and nobody thinks about that. They just see the finished product and go, they can't do that. But there's this whole story here that people obviously want quick results and they're not willing to look at all that, so they immediately jump to that conclusion. But yeah, it's a total science, and the evidence base from a natural coaching perspective is something obviously I do, but I hold very highly in regard for any natural competitor coming into the field. And I sort of sometimes see a female who wants to be a natural figure, but is under the realms of somebody who's, you know, got pretty much all of their competitors who are on the open stage. And I sort of question that, I sort of think, well, is that the right move for a natural athlete? I'm not sure. It's my opinion, I guess. But how long dare I ask? I know how long mine has been, and I always kind of have to swallow a pill, but how long has your prep been so far for this up and coming season, Jen? And I mean, Zoe, I know the answer to your question. How long was your prep for, obviously, the last shows?
Yeah.
Oh, well, this past, well, obviously for everybody, this has been a crazy couple of years. So, you know, my contest, we always end off, I guess, the height of my off season with, I guess, I think they call it the diet before the diet. So let's say, for example, I've gained, 25 pounds in the off season. We're going to try to lose about 10 of those in advance. And then we take quite an extensive, I guess you would call it, maintenance period, a couple of months before beginning the next phase. So I had done that to compete in 2020, actually. But of course, at the very end of my season, the shows kept getting moved and postponed until they were all finally canceled. So I found myself in a position where I was very close to stage ready, probably at the end of the summer last year. So we just went right straight into an off season, and I really had my heart set on competing this year. Although, like I said, my coaching is very collaborative, and I know that Berto probably would have preferred if I had waited even an extra year, just because we had we had dieted for most of 2020 as well. But yeah, typically I would say at least 24 weeks to 30 weeks. And I think that 30 is the magic number. I think 24 is just not enough. And it's like you can be conditioned enough to actually compete and maybe even be competitive at 24 weeks. But I think that 30 is where I'm going to see the best conditioning. And like you said, Steff, it you know, when you are natural, if you want to get to those levels of leanness, you need to have patience and trust the process, because it, you know, eventually it will come off. And sometimes, you know, I'm guilty of it probably once a week at least, where I'm like, oh, I just can't believe that it's ever going to look the way I want it to look. But eventually you get there, right? So yeah, it's a long time. Zoe, I'm curious, your first prep with the coach from your gym, how long was that one?
Oh, I knew this question was going to come up. I would say it was longer than 30 weeks.
Oh my.
And the finish, actually, was it? I think just over 30 weeks. And I mean, looking back now, I'm sure you both do the same. Like, how did I ever get on stage looking like that? But I guess we all start somewhere. But going from, so my old coach coached me for 2 shows. So in 2019, where I was more competitive, and it wasn't just I want to get on stage. I wanted to get to finals that year, which I did. So I got to WNBF finals and UKDFBA finals. And that prep was from February all the way to October or November. So most of the year I was dieting for all that time, and I think I had about 6 odd refeeds. Another one, going back to the previous conversation of the diet, I remember eating fish and rice cakes in 2019, which definitely did not happen this year or last.
Thank goodness.
It's a pretty big, I firstly, by the way, I completely agree. I think 30 weeks is a good benchmark. Obviously, you've got to consider the starting point. If somebody has got a lot to lose, obviously that's probably going to be longer. If somebody's got less to lose, I think still your 24 weeks is minimum. Because I have this premise as a natural coach, and just having seen so many different female bodies come into shape for shows, you've got, I call it the 2-part process for a female prep. You've got the female prep, and then you've got the prep for legs and back alone, which is like, you've got to literally pull it in and then drag that extra condition off the legs and the lower back in the last final point. And it's kind of a 4-week, 5-week process, just that alone, in my experience. And there's several different things that you can do alongside that. But I mean, my average sort of time scale, I mean, Zoe, you were going on nearly 34-ish weeks by the time we finally kind of tightened everything up there for your season. I'm sitting at 42 if I want to be at my absolute shredded, pinnacle, scary shape, the way I like it to be. Would I put everybody else through that? No, that's just something, like everybody has got their kind of where they level out, and then that's it.
Yeah.
But I think for any natural female who's really serious about getting the conditioning, caveat here as well is that you can't just go dieting for 30 odd weeks without a good muscle frame already. That's like obviously hugely important. You can't just put somebody in a prep like that. But I would definitely say, yeah, set yourself enough time, because time is the biggest commodity to a natural preparation. If you've got enough time, you can do a lot of different things. If you don't have the time, you'll end up just chasing that conditioning the whole way through. And that can be where the psychological side of it is just mayhem for a natural.
Yeah, it can be frustrating. This last contest prep, it's been, we've had a lot to navigate through, because so much uncertainty about when we're going to compete. I mean, I'm doing the California Muscle Mayhem, which is 6 weeks away now. And it was originally scheduled for July. And of course, and so when it was postponed, we slowed down the prep. and that's one of the things that I really appreciate, is that we're very proactive versus reactive. And as far as the timing goes, the more time, I think any of the coaches that I work with would tell you that, the more time you have with an athlete, the better.
Yeah.
Because then you can, have the time for those unexpected things like a pandemic.
Yeah.
And or postponed shows, but also, really good time, enough time for diet breaks and refeeds, and just actually figuring out what's working best from a fat loss perspective for your client.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, because then you've got the other proponent of this. I know we've touched on sort of the time length, but within that, I mean, I did a video on this way back in COVID, but kind of the phases of prep and what that looks like and what's included in each one. And sort of you've got a level of cardio perhaps at the beginning, which is quite base. That sort of changes in amongst maybe diet tweaks mid. And then by the end of it, you have what really is the most effective protocol. I think that's you've worked it out, you've dialed it, you know it, and your body's just responding nicely towards the end. And cardio, I guess, is the area that people often lie about, how much cardio they've got to do or whether they're doing it at all. But in my experience as a natural, you can't get away as that being a specific proponent of this phase, like this whole entire prep. You've got to utilize cardio to be able to get the weight off. And everyone has a slightly different way of doing that. I mean, let's touch on that, because what does it look like for you, I guess, Jen, just now, or what has it looked like in the past? Let's just have a wee chat about sort of the expenditure side of it.
Well, I think that in the past, before I was coaching with Berto, it was pretty rigid as far as the protocol was. You had, I think we started with one session 6 days a week, and it became twice daily by the end of the prep. With Berto, it's kind of changed over the years, I would say, almost progressed. So, there might have been some cardio, written into the program initially, this amount of time or this many calories weekly, and they would be, and that's what I would have to do on a weekly basis. But the last year, I guess this last prep, we've done a lot of it by step count, to be quite honest with you. So, and I've honestly found that works well. Like I will often do some cardio after training, just to more so just from an energy expenditure, because it just adds to the deficit. But one of the things that Berto had discovered with me was that, if I did do this scheduled cardio, that often I wouldn't move as much the rest of the day. Whereas now I'm conscious of it, much more conscious of it. And I've been able to squeak through so far with having to do minimal cardio. I hate to say it because I feel like
you should.
I'm totally jinxing myself, but yeah, like as a matter of fact, there was a point in the prep where because when I was updating Berto, I happened to mention the number of steps that I was doing a day, because what we had technically agreed on was, let's hit 10. But I was getting up to upwards of 15, 17,000 steps a day. And he thought it might be a good idea to dial that back a bit. And it did wonders for me.
Yeah.
So I might have been just like slightly stalled at the point, because I've been fortunate enough to be pretty predictable as far as my weight loss. And the minute I had that little extra recovery, I guess, it made a huge difference. So, and again, Steff, these are the things that as a natural coach, coaching natural competitors, you would understand.
Yeah.
another coach just wouldn't. That, what do you mean? You want me to do less movement? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And you know, and I don't know if you're like this, Zoe, but when I first was enlightened with these, you know, recovery, I guess recovery focused protocols, I was like, no, but I can work harder than that. Like I can, you know, don't worry, throw whatever it is that you have at me, I'll do it, right? But it's actually, it's sometimes less is more. I mean, how many times have you heard that in so many different things in life, right? So I now I'm open to it. Whereas before I would have been like, really? Are you sure? Now it's more like, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
you want me to do cardio?
Yeah, I mean, it's so person dependent. Like I've got some female athletes who, you know, they need a tickle across a week. I kind of put them in sort of two categories. You've got people who lose fat really easily, and it just nicely comes off without too much manipulation of cardio. Some people who are really, really what I call hard fat losers. You know, they don't lose easily, and we have to teach the body to kind of just get it off, you know.
Yeah.
And you really got that kind of balance, and it is just a case, everyone is so different, and it's not being afraid to sort of say to somebody, look, you don't need to be doing this amount of expenditure a week, because actually too much and you're stressing the body out. The recovery is then being obviously it's detrimental to recovery, because you're not allowing the body to just relax and do the processes it needs to do. I'm the complete opposite of you, Jen, in the sense that for me it's a hard slog. I have to really work hard to get the fat off my body. How did you find the cardio in terms of your prep, Zoe? Did you enjoy it?
I think at the start I didn't enjoy it at all, just because fitness levels from going off from an off season into obviously a prep it's not the best. And I can even relate to that now, coming out of prep 14 16 weeks ago now. That my fitness is not where it was. I mean, I was doing 20 hours plus, I think, at the maximum. So waking up 7 days a week, doing an hour's fasted cardio, which sounds awful when I'm doing it at 4 o'clock in the morning, but it was more so doing it at that time just to fit it into my day. But it set me up for the day. And I feel like with preps, with people going, oh, I've got to get up at 4, and one thing that you said to me, Steff, was, right, you're waking up, you're going to say, right, I've got this for the day. Like, you've got to set your mindset for doing all of this cardio, because it is stressful. And one thing I can relate to you both, like when your coach says to you, I don't want you to do cardio, you're like, but my shreds are coming, like I can see changes. But it's all about trusting the process. And Steff, obviously you've done amazing, like in your figure competitive figure seasons. So it's, again, I feel like picking that right coach, like they've been through it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think application, like practical application of something, stands for a lot. People don't I think value that enough. Like, this is kind of coming back to sort of choosing a coach to work with. I mean, I've actually always coached myself, so, and I've always wanted to understand why certain things work. And obviously jumping in and starting pro prep with Andrew years back now, it was like a really lovely click, because there were some things that and this is an interesting point, from a male point of view, he didn't realize until I started to explain to him, this is what she, or, you know, said client is experiencing, because I've been there, and it feels like that. And the hormonal response at this point, where your body is maybe trying to get over a hurdle of fat, like you're trying to get into that realm it doesn't want to, the body's fighting against it, menarche is going, I don't like being here. And there's so many kind of emotional and hormonal responses that he could read it, but he's not felt it. And sometimes you can't connect with that as much as a female can. And I think there is a huge value in that when working with a female coach, if you're a female yourself, because we are different vehicles. we are very different vehicles. And I think from working with him, I've seen a lot from the scientific point of view of when to apply certain things at certain times. And from his side, he's realized that certain female bodies can take X and others can't. And there's certain things that you have to kind of look out for, like red warning signs, etc. So yeah, I mean, I think like what you just said there, Zoe, about having people that have actually done it, been there, and feel very comfortable in the natural circuit, and then what that looks like as a prep is very important. But yeah, I think we've covered so much today, actually, in terms of obviously a lot of natural realms. I'm going to leave it kind of on a question for you girls. So if for any natural or person watching this or listening to this who's considering competing, if you could give them a reason to come and compete in the natural circuit, what would it be?
Go on, Jen.
Oh. Well, I think that it's like you've both said, that it's just a different culture, a different atmosphere. That what I feel different, what I feel is the biggest difference is it feels more like a family, less political, more athlete driven, and just a desire to help one another as well. I've never seen an industry share so much knowledge freely. One of the things that I remember about the non-natural circuit was that everybody held their protocol so tightly that, you know, they had the magic that was going to get you to stage looking the best. Whereas I feel like in the natural community, everybody is so willing to share their knowledge and their experiences. And I think that's what's so wonderful about this podcast is that I wish that this had been around when I started because it would have been so helpful. But that for me, I think it would be if you want to be around like-minded individuals amongst peers, people who, you know, have your health and well-being, you know, top of mind, definitely look for a coach that is, you know, natural, evidence-based, and has experience coaching women just like you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jen. That sort of family community, and I feel like the best thing before I joined Steff and Andrew of Pro Prep was looking at their clients as well, like seeing what results they had given their natural athletes already, and sort of doing a bit of background work. And obviously Steff, you were one of my inspos.
Oh, for sure. Mine too.
I feel like I need to get back up on stage and like keep that fire burning because it's been a while.
Yeah, you know, I don't know about you, Zoe, but when it's been a while, I always feel like, can I really do this again? You know, sometimes you need a reminder. But I just wanted to say one thing for the record. I will probably have to do cardio. Yeah. So I know my coach is going to listen to this and say,
I know,
right? Right. We're getting to the end, right? So this is where the magic happens.
Absolutely, 100%. And actually, you know, there's so many other things I could kind of touch on here, but see, even just the differences, and I'd love Andrew to come in on this as well, but he's done some podcasts with Berto as well.
Just recently.
Yeah, just recently, where you know, and we've talked about this over dinner before and stuff like that. The approaches across the pond as well, you know, across in America, in Canada, even further afield. We've got a client who's based in Australia, and we talk about protocols. There are some kind of trends sometimes that kind of stay in a place, you know, for the different kind of preps that people do, or you know, a lot of the time we have seen across the US, they take quite a low carb approach to dieting, whereas in the UK they take a really high approach to like carbs for condition, and that's like a driven home point over here. And like there's kind of these interesting debates and I suppose discussions around the best ways or the most evidence-based approach to your contest prep. And that's a whole other story, which maybe I can bring Andrew in on at one point, because he is definitely, he's published papers on this stuff. So that's another interesting point. But I think those are great things to give to natural athletes, and especially females who are considering coming onto the circuit. And this is an amazing place to start, guys. I'm not just using this podcast to say this, but if you're interested in bodybuilding or trying in the bikini circuit or the figure circuit, start somewhere where you can really truly test your potential here in this body as it is, on a level playing field against other females that are in the same place as you, because it will only inspire and motivate you to continue. When you jump sometimes into the big rounds, like say you're a complete first timer, and then in the UK, you go and jump on the two bros circuit, which is the equivalent of like the NPC or IFBB circuit over there, Jen. That's like jumping full head first into like a whole other thing. And it can be, but I've got a couple of clients who come to me recently, and they did that and felt extremely demotivated because they just weren't in the right place for where they're at this current moment in time. And that could be that could actually make a decision for somebody not to do it when actually they've got potential, or they've maybe got like a real want to go down that way. So down and do the bodybuilding. So I think for me, I really wanted to kind of do this podcast just to make people a wee bit aware of natural competing, to put you guys on the map. So if anybody wants to come and maybe DM you or inbox you about your experiences, to speak to more natural figure competitors who are extremely good at what they do. And I'd love our listeners to go and view both of your socials right now. So where can they find you? Where can people find you guys?
You can find me at Body Positive UK on Instagram. On the gram, of course.
On the gram.
And Jen?
And I'm Jennifer _Mercieca, which is my last name on Instagram. I'm not quite as active, I'm sure, as all of you all are, but I do have the odd post.
Yeah. Well, I'll be sharing you guys and your Instagram handles in the comments box down below. And guys, if anybody's listening and has any more questions on the back of this podcast about natural competing, what's involved in it, how it all works, and anything we've discussed today, we'd be happy to help you out with any questions. So from today, thank you very much, ladies, for joining us, and we'll speak on the next one.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.